In the second unresolved problem segment tonight, Edward Snowden and the National Security Agency. Today, a federal judge in New York ruled that the NSA's massive collection of domestic telephone data is legal and dismissed the lawsuit brought by the ACLU. But a week ago, another federal judge ruled the opposite way, increasing the odds that the Supreme Court will eventually decide the matter. And earlier this week, NSA leaker Edward Snowden released his own Christmas message.
A child born today will grow up with no conception of privacy at all. They'll never know what it means to have a private moment to themselves, an unrecorded, unanalyzed thought. And that's a problem because privacy matters. Privacy is what allows us to determine who we are and who we want to be.
Joining us now from Washington, Cliff May, the president of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, and Camille Foster, a co-host of The Independents, which airs at 9 p.m. on the Fox Business Network. Mr. Foster, let me begin with you. Do you agree when I say that we face a terrorist threat in this country?
Undoubtedly.
And do you agree when I say to you that we have now new types of technology previously unavailable, and it gives us an advantage in discerning a terrorist threat?
That is generally true as well.
Okay, so then how can you, as I understand it, side with Edward Snowden in saying that, you know what, the United States government should not be looking at telephone data?
Well, fortunately for me, in making this argument, those first two questions don't make it absolutely necessarily true that Edward Snowden is behaving appropriately here. There are at least three questions that we want to consider, the first of which is the question of the constitutionality of this program, and it's very clear that that is in dispute. Two federal judges, as you've already mentioned, have said very different things, but for anyone keeping score, there are at least two other folks who've also weighed in on this. This is the President's counsel that he's convened, and at least one FISA court judge who has cited continuous and systematic abuses of the program. And one of the other things that we want to look at is, are these programs actually effective? And that is also in serious dispute. The judge today cited 3 examples of previous incidences in which metadata was used, but it is not clear that this specific program was used. So I do think that there's every reason to ask whether or not these programs are effective, whether or not there's the potential for abuse, not whether or not abuse has happened, and whether or not these programs are even worth the investment.
Okay, let me bring Cliff May into this. Cliff, now you just heard Mr. Foster say, well, you know, you had Judge Richard Leon last week say this is unconstitutional, a violation of our Fourth Amendment rights against illegal search and seizure. And he also said no evidence that there's ever been a moment when the government was able to find terrorist activity based on looking at this data. Do you buy this argument?
I actually don't, though I think reasonable people can disagree on it. What I don't think reasonable people can disagree on is the following. Edward Snowden was a government contractor. Government contractors, government employees, they take an oath not to disclose publicly to our enemies information that is secret and that is proprietary by the U.S. government. If you violate that oath, you should be criminally prosecuted. Edward Snowden could have gotten involved in this debate. He could have come on and talked to you or Bill O'Reilly. He could have gone to Congress and talked to them about this, but what he did instead was to steal information and reveal it. That's a crime. We should all be able to agree that what he did is reprehensible, and he should be brought to justice. Now, as to the constitutionality, that's a different. I think this program is constitutional. I think people don't understand. There aren't guys with big earphones listening into your conversations or mine. What they're doing is they are taking numbers, billions of electrons, and they are storing them for such time as they may need to explore those. If you want to connect the dots, you must collect the dots, and that's all they are doing. NSA
that's a good point,
right to do
Mr. Foster. Now, I think that's an important point. There's not one example of where the government has been snooping in someone's telephone or computer data and discovering, oh, they're looking at nasty pictures or something.
That's a fair point, but again, that is not the standard. Metadata is a very powerful and indeed invasive tool. You can know people's associations, where they were,
but there's no evidence they've ever.
Edward, I'll take that. But again, I don't need to demonstrate that the abuse has happened, only that the abuse is possible. And again, there are at least two other issues that I brought up. One is about the effectiveness of these programs, and the other is about the efficiency of these programs.
Okay, let me quickly give you the final word, Cliff, quickly.
Let me start with this. Of course, abuses are possible. When you give guns to policemen, abuses are possible, but you need to do it to protect the citizenry. Same thing, and the checks are the courts. You cannot find out, and you cannot connect the dots and use them intrusively without the courts coming in and okaying it.
Gentlemen, this is a terrific art. We're going to come back to this. Bill O'Reilly's going to be back to it. Thank you both very much for coming in.
My pleasure.